Hi, this is Mark Arnold, and yet another episode of Fun Ideas Podcast. And this is a surprise for Michael. This is episode number 300.
Whoa, hey,
Woo!
congrats. They weren't all videos before though. A lot of them were just
No, they weren't.
audio
Probably
before,
the
right?
first 100 were
Yeah.
audio only. You were
Hmm.
an early video one, I think.
Yeah.
And Jerry Beck was second. And then, when the pandemic came through, it's like, let's just do both. It's easier. And Zoom is a lot better than now I can't
Skype.
think of Skype. Thank you.
Skype. Yes.
That old piece of shit thing that they used, that everybody used to use that,
Yep.
people swore by that nobody uses now,
Oh, I
so
mentioned Skype in one of my novels back in the days when Skype was there. And now the novel is all outdated. It's like everyone's going to read and go, "What the hell, is Skype?" Oh
just
well.
do version 2 Skype replace Zoom. There we go. I was wondering in the future if something will happen. Probably not because Zoom is pretty good about updating and everything like that.
We use it
Uh,
in courts. The court uses it all the time for,
yeah,
getting prisoners so they don't have to come to court.
yeah.
No.
Well, we
So
use it too. Behavioral health is what I said I worked at before we started, and we use it for telehealth. So if the provider doesn't have to be in the office, we can set up a room for somebody, and there's your provider.
hmm.
Some people don't like it, some people love it. So it's like, you know, to each his their own. If
Yep.
they can't, if they don't like it, they can always see him in person. There we go. Traditional. Okay, so we're at episode 300, and we're gonna talk about a lot of different things. Let's talk about the Monkees first because I put the Monkees background on here.
All right.
Um, so this is the 60th anniversary coming up this September of the Monkees. I was in my mom's stomach at that time, so I don't have much to say about
Oh, I
it.
was a kid. I guess I was around eight or so. And the frustrating thing to me was that it was on Monday nights when I had Boy Scout meetings. So I never got to see it because back in those days, you couldn't record it,
Right.
back in the 60s. So I really didn't get to see very many of the episodes except unless I was sick or they canceled the meeting or something until Saturday morning when they started showing it on Saturday morning. That's when I really caught up on it.
Hmm.
But I was always more interested in the music than the TV show anyway. I don't think I've watched the show in years.
Yeah.
Um, it was the
Well,
music that got me interested.
I've told my story before. It's even in our books, which if you want to hold up. But I'll
Mostly.
say that I didn't like the Monkees originally. I was more like you. I like the music. I love the theme song. Oops, now it's getting all blurry and
The
going out of
blurred background. Oh, heck with it. Anyway,
anyway, I'll show you one of them and then I'll say
there you
something.
go.
So
Yeah. So if
yeah,
I
there we
unblur
go.
my background, you see my
Yeah.
sloppy room that I work in.
Yes, a long title, looking for the good times, examining the Monkees songs one by one. And that's our first book. We put it out, I think, in 2016. Is 2017? I don't remember.
Sounds about right.
2018.
But of course, we've
Yeah.
updated it since then.
Yes. Yeah. It had the final Christmas album and the Mike and Mickey live album. So
Hmm.
other than, various reissues like they're continuing to do, this was probably the last new material that they will ever put out at this point.
Yeah.
So anyway, my case with the Monkees is that I still consider myself a first generation Monkee fan, even though people said, well, you weren't there. It's like, well, they ran consistently from 1966 to 1973. If it was not in prime time, it was on Saturday morning. And I saw it on Saturday morning, so I was definitely watching it at the beginning. I didn't like the show that much because I thought it was a little too hammy. And it's like, it's kind of funny for a kid like me who watched junk like the Three Stooges and everything else to think that it was too hammy. But I just kind of thought that at the time. And so I did enjoy the music. So if I saw a music video, I would just like, oh, okay, that's cool. I didn't know they were called music videos back then, but it's like, um, I didn't become a true fan until like a decade later, when I got more of the Monkees. I found it at some garage sale and it was quarter.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I looked at the back and I go, I think I know I'm a believer. And, some of these songs I think I'm familiar with. And I said, the worst, I'm just gambling a quarter. If I don't like it,
Yeah.
I can throw it in the thrift store. And I put down the needle and started listening to it and I loved it. It was like, wow, every song I knew, I said, wow, this is great. I'm surprised because I know we have our mutual friend Ed Rising who loves the Partridge Family.
Yeah.
Never liked all their songs as much.
No.
I mean, there's a few that I like, but it's never embraced me like the Monkees. I got obsessed with. What once I really got into them, I had to have all their albums, and then I found out that there was albums that came out after the show was off the air, and I was like, and of course back then they were out of print. It's like ah,
Yeah. Well, that was the most amazing thing to me is finding out years later that there was an album called Instant Replay. I had never seen that before. And finding that in a old used record store was just amazing to me. But yeah, you're right. It was hard to find information about the Monkees. There was no internet back there.
no,
And it was a while until someone actually wrote a book about them. And
right,
that's when you could read it, the Eric Lefkowitz's book.
Lefkowitz, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and so there was a lot of times we just didn't have any information. I didn't know anything about this
Right.
stuff. So yeah,
Well,
you're right.
I just figured it was a TV show, which it was, and there were just four actors. They did the show and they were done.
Hmm.
And for some reason, somebody got the brilliant idea of putting out albums that were like albums as opposed to just a soundtrack,
Right.
where you take audio clips from the show and maybe have instrumental music between,
Hmm.
actual
Yeah,
songs,
they treated it like a real band on the records,
right.
absolutely. Which
And
is caused some problems for the Monkees later when people
yeah,
said they don't play their instruments. Well, we're just actors. Come on.
right, right. But the cool thing about it is then years later, there's so much to discover that it's like you could arguably compare them to the Beatles and the Stones and the Who and everybody else out in the 60s who were progressing.
In terms of influence, absolutely. I mean, the Monkees were the reason that I wanted to be a musician and why I eventually started a band too, and I was writing my own little simple songs when I was 12 and 13 on my, with the three chords I knew on my guitar, because of the Monkees, really. And that was part of the fun of it. It wasn't until later that I started getting the Beatles albums going, hey, these guys are better than the Monkees. I sort of switched my allegiance a little bit. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't think I would put, if you ask me what my top 15 best groups are, I don't know if the Monkees would actually make that.
Oh, really?
But it's still, I still love the music. I love a lot more music though,
Yeah.
Um,
For
and
me, they're near the
I
top.
know more about the Monkees than some of the bands who are on my list because I'm still got a little bit of obsession about them, even though I don't necessarily think that they're better than, say, XTC or Talking Heads.
Well, let me ask you this because I do this with groups that I like. There's certain groups that you like to know everything about them, about their personalities, about what they like, what they do outside of being
Mhm.
that group. And then there's other ones, you just like the music and you don't really care where they came from, if they're even British or American or
Right.
whatever. It's just like this is just great music and I'm gonna like it and I don't care two figs about the band itself.
Right. And
So,
it's true. It's interesting, especially when I was younger and I was in a band and I was working at a college radio station, and I'd get Billboard magazine every week, and I'd get, Hit Parader, and I'd get all the magazines and I'd read up on all these bands, and I knew everything about these bands back in those days. Now I get an album and I don't, partially I can't read it because it's so small on a CD. But yeah, it used to be fun to get an album and sit down and listen to the
yeah,
entire album and read the lyrics along with it. And
yeah.
you just don't get that anymore. And I think that's one of the reasons why maybe people aren't as connected to the music maybe nowadays.
Well, vinyl has made some sort of a comeback, but the problem is it costs so dang much. It's like, it's like when it used to be like, when I was picking up these Monkees albums, except for the ones we were talking about that are out of print, you could a quarter.
Yeah, true.
Many of the early Monkees albums I probably got for maybe $3 or less, and it's
Yep.
like commonly available in thrift stores at that time. It's like so if you wanted a decent collection of the good albums, because people don't even like the later ones typically, yeah, you could get the first five albums pretty cheaply and the greatest hits probably and be done and just say, okay, I got a nice little collection here and probably paid $20. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
nowadays they reissue it and you got a Rhino Super Collection Super Deluxo and it's like $300 on CD and $500 on LP, and it's like, "Arr,"
Yeah, I'm not into vinyl because I don't I like my music to be nice and smooth without any pops and cracks and everything. Plus nowadays I download this stuff and put it on my phone and then listen to it in the car half the time.
yeah,
It's not like the old days where you get an album, you put it on, you put the headphones on, and you sit there and listen to it from song after song. Now you don't even hear the songs in order necessarily.
yeah,
So we've lost something in a sense while we've gained other things.
yeah. I don't know if it would ever come back because I mean, the
Mhm.
only way it would come back completely is if suddenly Spotify and those type of services suddenly charge through the roof to where it'd be economically impossible to pay a monthly fee just to get every song ever made. You
Yeah.
know, so,
Mhm.
and the ones missing, well, you can supplement that with, tapes or recordings or make your own CDs or whatever,
Mhm.
but I don't know. I still buy CDs. I still buy a little bit of vinyl, but
I do buy CDs every now and then, especially because we have a good used CD store in town
yep,
and I can get them cheap and I find things. And it's a good way to find new music that I go, well, I'm willing to spend $3 on this and see if it's any good. So it's,
yeah. But I stopped the line on some of these Monkees releases because it's like if there's nothing new to offer,
right.
why get another compilation?
Well, the
Uh,
remix of Headquarters was wonderful. It
yeah.
sounds so much better.
Hmm.
If they could do that with Pisces, I'd be thrilled. I'd go out and buy it. But the new release that's just the A sides and the B sides, I already have all those songs. I'm
Yeah.
not into packaging.
Right.
I don't care what the packaging is. I'm in for the music.
Yeah.
And so, but a lot of people like to collect that. I used to. I used to collect, oh, it's on blue vinyl. I got to get the blue vinyl copy.
Yeah.
I used to
I,
buy all this stuff, and now I'm just like, it's just packaging. You're
yeah.
buying it for the music. And so,
I like packaging to a point, when
yeah,
it becomes where it's more about the packaging than the product itself. But I mean, if you get it, I'll just throw out an album out there, Venus and Mars, by Wings, if they have a little poster inside and a sticker sheet and stuff like that, that's fun.
it was. It's
But it's like to have the super deluxo set that has like
all the
some.
outtakes and the live versions
Yeah, the
and
live versions are usually like
bringing it.
so-so and everything. If they were that great, they would have put them out back then. That's what I
Well,
always think.
it's like when they do put out the extended editions of the Monkees albums and the Beatles albums. I usually get the one that only has like one or two CDs in it instead of four or five.
Yeah,
I, I like hearing the early versions once.
yeah,
So to me, it's like watching a documentary or something.
right.
But I'm not interested in listening to it five or six times.
Yeah.
So
For me,
yeah,
I like to have totally unique songs. So one of the positive things, but I wish they would remaster them just because it's been so long, is those missing link collections where they just put brand new tracks for the most part.
yep,
They didn't have 10 versions of, Last Train to Clarksville and watching
right.
it,
No,
all.
those were worthy albums to get.
Yeah.
Some of the songs were terrible,
Oh yeah.
but it was cool to get them,
Yeah.
and hear them.
But even on the Beatles, I had to burn my own because, we just had the recent Anthology 4 and the
Right.
updated anthology series with episode 9, but it way back when I burned my own copy of Anthology where I took only the unique tracks. Even the
Mhm.
ones that kind of suck, like What's the News, Mary Jane, things like
Right.
that, just because it's a brand new song rather
Yes.
than take 12 of Till There Was You or whatever,
No, I'm not
Yeah.
interested in that. Yeah, but I agree, especially Anthology 1. There were so
Mhm.
many good new songs. I mean, Leave My Kitten Alone and
Yep.
and the Decca tapes that were in good condition,
Yep.
and sounded really good. That's what I was more interested in.
Yeah.
But there are a couple things that I kept and I put on my phone so I can listen to it in the car, like the early version of And Your Bird Can Sing,
Mhm.
or the early version of some of the songs, the early versions are different, but they're unique,
Yeah.
unique songs in and of themselves. So that I kind of liked.
Yeah. And I would say that about While My Guitar Gently Weeps, the kind of
Yes,
acoustic version.
yes, the
Uh
acoustic version of that with the
I
strings
understand why
attached to.
George put all the heavy instrumentation in the strings because he's competing with Lennon and McCartney, and you got to make it sound good. But
Mhm.
had he put that on All Things Must Pass, he might have done the earlier version, just as more of a acoustic piece
Mhm.
within. But even All
Yeah,
Things Must Pass, he put. where I
Now,
thought he could
they
have toned
released
it
that
down a
recently.
little bit, you know.
I was hoping they were going to re-release that and unspectrify
Yeah.
it. I still think the album is much too muddy, and I'd
Yeah.
love to hear it a lot cleaner.
Yes. Yeah.
Because they're
So
good songs. It's just I don't like the production,
before we switch to another topic, this
which we're doing a
September,
lot of.
yeah, we'll
Anyway, go
probably
ahead.
switch. We'll say more about the Monkees, but uh, this September, our mutual friend Charles F. Rosenay is putting on a Monkees convention. Now, before we say that we're both showing up, we are, but uh, I had talked to Charles as far back as when I went to England with him on one of his Liverpool tours, and I said, I missed out on all that monkey stuff and all those other conventions you did because you did them all before I got to know you. I mean, knew of you, but you're on the East Coast. What am I flying out to the East Coast just randomly? I also never had any money or anything like that. So I said,
Mhm.
if you ever do another convention, I'll show up.
Ah,
And he said, I don't know. They're all passed away, and I don't know if I'll do one. And then suddenly out of the blue, he says, I'm going to do one. You know?
well, it'll be interesting. It'll be the first time you and I have met.
Yes.
We talked before. We put these books together almost entirely through emails.
Yeah.
So I finally get to see you.
Yeah. Well, it's
So
just
I'm
like
looking forward to it.
Charles and
It'll be
me. I mean,
fun.
I met Charles sooner, but
Yeah.
we worked on a Turtles book and we met in England. Well, yeah, it was in England because we
Mhm.
didn't meet in New York because of the circumstances of how my travel worked. I had to bypass and go out of Atlanta to go to to London, whereas the rest of the group was going from New York to London,
Ah,
and I actually beat them over there.
ah.
A long involved
Yeah, I'd
story
love to
on
do
that.
that one of these years.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be
I'd
nice.
highly recommend it. I miss it. When I started on the trip with him, I said, "How do you do this year after year after year?" And then when it was done, I said, "I see why you do this year after year." And especially once you're done with it, you go, "I want to do that again." And it's like, "Oh, it's around the other side of the planet."
Yeah.
It's like it's not that easy to get to, and it's like, "Okay, all right."
Well,
Yes.
I first met Charles, believe it or not, back in the 90s. I wrote an article for his magazine, Good Day Sunshine,
Edition.
which is
Yeah.
his Beatle fanzine, back in the days before the internet.
Hmm.
And he published the article, and I was a subscriber to it. And then years later, when I got to meet him, mostly because of Plastic EP's thing,
Right.
we realized that we had known each other, and it was kind of interesting. That, oh, wait, oh, you did this? Oh, yeah. Well, I wrote for you. You did, and it was kind
Yeah.
of cool. So it's kind of nice that it's working out. Now he did the Peter Tork thing, the convention, caught it quite a few years ago
Right.
in the
Right.
same hotel, and I was there for that,
Oh,
and
okay.
it was very nice. They have one room that's set aside just for the merchants, and then the next room over is where all the concerts happen, which is wonderful. I got to listen to them even though I couldn't see them.
Yeah.
So that's what I like mostly about these kind of conventions is hearing the music.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah. It's really interesting how these type of things work. You might be able to explain it more than I would because you're from the East Coast. You don't get those type of conventions. You get comic book conventions out here. You get some
Hmm,
type of horror film conventions on occasion, but you never get Beatles ones. You'd never get a Monkees one. And it's
interesting.
funny since the Monkees were home based in Los Angeles, yet we
Yeah,
get Monkees Museum in Connecticut, and the shows in Connecticut, and it's like, and
I can't explain why, but I don't. I'm not complaining.
this is my theory. Okay, for some reason. And it might be a New York type thing or an East Coast type thing. And it probably started with the Beatles, among anything else,
Hmm.
is the Beatles came in to Ed Sullivan, a New York-based show, into JFK or whatever it was called back then,
Hmm.
Idlewild, I guess,
Yeah.
and so New Yorkers, because I've talked to many of them, embrace the Beatles as their own, so much so is a lot of people kind of forget that they're British. It's like, and since we had our own versions of the albums from Capitol and everything like that, it was like, this is our Beatles, and it's like, that
But
didn't happen so much in the West Coast. And it might be because we had our own bands out here, or we
yeah,
just
I
don't
don't know.
embrace things the same way, or acts don't tend to come in through San Francisco and LA typically from other countries. They always go East Coast.
They start from Europe, and New York is the first stop on the way.
Right.
from Europe. That makes sense too. I'm not sure what the answer is. I will say that the guy who runs the Beatles convention is from New York, so that's part of it, because he started in New York with those conventions. He now runs them in
Hmm.
Chicago and I think it is LA too.
Yeah.
Um, but that might be part of it. I don't know.
Okay.
Good. I mean, and then John, of course, moved to New York City.
Yeah.
Ringo lives in LA, I think, still mostly.
Yeah.
Um, but
But
I
LA
don't.
never kind of embraced it the same way. I mean, it's
No,
like, um, like a lot of the supposedly historical monuments, like Candlestick Park, let's say, it's torn down, and there's not even
yeah.
a plaque or anything. It's just gone, thing. And
Hmm.
I think Dodgers don't play in the same stadium either, and so that's gone in LA. And well,
Ah,
I don't know.
well, and New York really embraced John too, because one of the
Yeah.
things John liked about New York is that, and one thing I've noticed when I lived in New York is that people leave each other alone. So if a celebrity walks down the street, no one walks up to them and starts bugging them.
Hmm.
They let them live their life. And
Yeah.
that's when you live in a city that crowded, you sort of treat everybody like that. And people from the West Coast think that that's being rude. And no, it's being polite. It's leaving them alone,
Yeah. Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think that's what John really liked about New York too.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's there's plaques and things for John all over New York City, and
Yeah.
and strawberry fields and everything. When I
Yeah.
lived in Boston, there was I remember going into a laundromat one time,
Mhm.
and they had a little plaque saying, "This is where John and Yoko did their laundry." And I went, "Oh, that's kind of cool." And John and Yoko were in Boston. They came in here to do their laundry,
Wow.
so they had a little plaque for it. Well,
Now, I
okay,
can't say there isn't anything like that. I think there's a it's Bob's Big Boy or some restaurant down in LA that has a Beatles booth in it where they ate, when they did the Hollywood Bowl. So,
Mhm.
there are a few things, and of course the
Oh
Hollywood
yeah,
Bowl
and
still
I was at
exists.
a
So,
hotel in
mm,
Washington D.C. For a convention recently,
yeah,
and that's where the Beatles stayed when they played in D.C.
yeah.
And they have the song list. They actually got the song list in Paul's handwriting in
Oh,
behind a glass, of course, hung up on the wall. So this is the song list when they stayed at this hotel. That was kind of cool.
yeah. Now, one thing I've had different discussions on, and of course, I have a friend who's from New York, and he swears up and down this is true. Uh, and even that recent Beatles 64 documentary on Disney Plus confirmed this, but it just doesn't sit well with me. It might be because I'm younger, and it might be because I'm from the West Coast, or both. That everybody was in a funk because of JFK being assassinated, and the Beatles brought everybody out of that. But it's like, what was the excuse for Sweden? What was the excuse for France? What was the excuse? Because they weren't all Kennedy fans, and it's like, if that's the case, should Lee Harvey Oswald be hailed as a hero? I mean, you
Well,
know,
the Beatles were
I'm
big in Europe long before they came to America too.
yeah,
You
but
know, so I don't know if that argument really makes much sense. I think the Beatles, even if JFK was still alive, the Beatles still would have had that much of an impact, I think, on
and I
America because
think
they
so
certainly did
too.
it
I
in
think
Europe.
if
Right.
anything, they would have been playing their next birthday. It wouldn't have been Marilyn Monroe. It would have been the
Yeah.
Beatles playing for Kennedy.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
I get it that the world was in, at least the United States was in, you know,
A bit of a shock, yes.
a bit of shock and in mourning and everything. But even things like, how I was saying just a second earlier, how the Beatles have been more embraced on the East Coast than the West Coast. Even the president is an East Coast type thing, you
Yeah.
know, you know,
Yeah.
and so it's like, because I asked my dad, I said, because my dad obviously was alive, when Kennedy was shot. I said, was that a big thing out here? And he goes, oh God, it was 4 days of dreary music. I hated it. It's like, meanwhile on the East Coast, oh, he was the best president ever. And it's like, it's not my dad isn't emotional. It's just there's kind of a different attitude towards the presidency. And I'm not talking about current stuff. I'm just talking about in general, and it's
Yeah.
like,
Well,
eh,
yeah, you're right because the stuff happens here. New York is where all the TV networks are located.
yeah,
The news networks are all New York based. JFK was from Boston and other East Coast, and
yeah,
so it meant a lot to Boston, of course. And there's Washington. So yeah, sure, that makes a lot of sense that things are much more local news. It gets more play here. At the
yeah,
same time, all kind of stuff happens in Hollywood that we on the East Coast don't care about.
yeah,
It seems to make all
true
kind of
too.
big headlines.
Yeah.
You know?
And I have lived down there for a while, and it is a different world when you're in it than when you're just kind of observing it from afar, like I am now, and it's like,
I was only in LA for like a few, like 4 or 5 days when Heidi was on. My wife was on To Tell the Truth, and they flew us out to LA. And so I got to see what LA was like. And I was impressed with the weather. Oh my God, I can see why people want to live there. The weather was beautiful every
yeah,
single day.
yeah,
But and everyone was beautiful. All the people were beautiful. And they were all actors hoping to get jobs because we were in
yeah, of
Hollywood. That's
course,
where they
yeah, yeah,
put us up. All the waitresses and everyone just looked great. And we walked down the street and go, everyone's looking good. This is not like New York. Um, but it was also a very different way of looking at the world. It's very laid back and kind of
yeah,
different, yeah, East Coast versus West Coast, there's absolutely differences.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, enough about
Boy,
that. That is just,
there's
oh,
a off topic we just got
yeah,
onto.
well, I mean, I brought it up basically because, it's like I'm always curious about this. And so, the whole point of it is, to do a monkeys convention, even though the monkeys were formed in Hollywood. Uh,
Yep.
I'm flying to the East Coast to possibly a city the monkeys never toured at. I don't know. Did they perform in Connecticut? I think they did once, if I referenced our book here about concert
Well,
dates.
the other
It's
thing
like,
is that, we're a lot more crowded on the East Coast than you are out there.
yeah,
In other words, people can drive 4 or 5 hours and go to another state out here. And if you're in California, you can drive 4 or 5 hours, you're still in California.
right.
So if they had it in LA, pretty much you get the LA crowd, and that would be it.
Yeah.
Whereas you have it in Connecticut, you can get people from Boston and New York, and they're gonna in Philadelphia, we're all gonna go there because it's not that long of a drive for
And it
us.
is true. I mean, there's this weird rivalry in California and living in Northern California. If they do something in Southern California, it's not necessarily a go. Let's go. It's in LA. It's like,
Yeah,
oh, it's in LA. Why can't they do it up here?
yeah,
That's usually the attitude. Yeah.
no, exactly. My brother lives in San Francisco, out in the Napa Valley, north of
Yeah,
San
yeah.
Francisco. I really like that area. I
Yeah,
could see
it's
myself
nice.
living
Yeah.
out there.
Yep.
It's definitely different from LA.
Definitely. Well, when I was a kid, I liked LA more, but I was more into the pop culture type stuff. And
Yeah,
it's like I was there, and then my dad moved away, But now it's like at this age, I'm like, eh. Well, also with the internet and
yeah,
connections like this,
yeah. I
it
mean,
doesn't
there'd be
matter
things.
anymore.
Every once in a while I say, wow, what if I had gone to LA for law school instead of Boston? And maybe I would have made some connections there because my God, I can write better sitcoms than these guys can write. I just have to go, anyway, but I guess that's true no
Yeah.
matter where you
Yeah.
live.
So, the last I'll say about the Monkees convention is just the dates. It's called Monkees 60, and there's stuff going on September 5th, 6th, and 7th. The main day is the 6th, which is Saturday, but I mean, apparently there's stuff on Friday night
Yeah, Friday
and
night
on
is like the
Sunday.
big
Yeah.
VIP party, which of course we'll be part of because we're VIPs.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and I'm not sure who else is going to get as VIPs. That's the interesting thing. I mean, he got some pretty good big name guests last time for the Peter Tork one.
Mickey, Mickey, Mickey,
It would
Mickey.
be
Oh,
nice if Mickey made it. It would be. If nothing else, Mickey would probably do a video,
yeah.
'cause that's, and say, hey, everyone. He's done
Yeah.
that before for these kind of things. But he's going to get some pretty good bands. I'm sure of that because
Yeah.
he's done
Yeah.
these things before. He'll get some of the Beatle cover bands. Yeah, and for the price he's paying, he better get some bands for the price he's asking.
Yeah.
Um,
Now, I don't know if I told you this. You're coming into town. I'm coming into town Thursday, so you're staying Friday night, Saturday night. Is that the
yes.
nights? Okay, perfect. Yeah, and originally I was going to leave Monday because I go, oh, Labor Day, and then I said, what am I staying another day for? And so I booked it, so I'm leaving Sunday night or Sunday
Yeah.
afternoon or something like that. And then Charles says, oh, there's a Monkees museum. We're going to it on Sunday night or Sunday, and I go. I can't go. He said, can I do it on Friday when I'm not doing it? No, it's only on Sunday. It's like, okay, so I will miss it. So, and so will you, unless you decide to stick around. But,
I'm not sure if I'm going to stick around. I might. It's a
yeah,
good 4.5, 5 hour drive for
yeah.
me. So I'm not sure. We'll see how this goes.
And I investigated into if I could change my ticket. And, well, it's another couple hundred to do that. And also another couple hundred to do the room again. So it's like,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, it's probably
So,
not worth it.
so I said, if it was any other thing, I might do it, but it's like, and then, I may regret it, but it's like, to have another convention. I don't know. Anyway,
Well, I hope
so
some of the people who are watching this will go there and say hi to us.
Yes.
and we can autograph their books.
Yeah. Well, it is a chance, a rare chance to see both authors together and of the Monkees books and both authors together of the Turtles books. So,
Oh, that's true.
because I'm making the effort to go to the East Coast. I love the East Coast. I wish I could go more frequently, but money's always a consideration
Of
to
course.
going frequently, If I was wealthy and just had houses anywhere in the country and hey, and said no
No, I
place,
know that feeling. Don't
yeah.
worry.
But anyway.
Yeah.
All right. Switching topics somewhat, it's still music, but you had mentioned to me before we went on that you're working on a book about Elton John.
Well,
So,
yeah, I mean, I did the Beatles book about a couple years ago. A Beatles book called
oh yeah,
The Beatles. Oh, you have a copy, don't
I
you?
have a
Yes.
copy right here.
There you go. The Beatles on the charts. And what I did was I went through Billboard charts from 1964 all the way up to the day the book came out almost, and counted it up. So if a song was number one, it got 100 points. If it was number 100, it got 1 point. And then we did a countdown. So you count down the albums, you count down the singles, and that sort of thing. So I decided afterwards I wanted to do one for Elton John.
Oh,
Now,
okay.
there's no deadline, so it's been taking me forever because every once when I have time, I get on Billboard. I have finished that. So I've gotten from 1970 all the way up to now, the Billboard charts to figure out what is, because he's had as many singles and albums as the Beatles had almost. It's
Right.
amazing. How
Yeah.
he's hardly ever been off the chart.
Hmm.
Um, and so what I'm doing now is I'm putting them in order and I'm writing a little description for each one and getting the pictures and everything. And so it may be a while till that gets done because I have other projects at the same time, some of them which have deadlines. But that it's going to be an interesting book, and he's an interesting character. I don't know him as well as I know the Beatles. In
Okay.
other words, I don't have every single Elton John album. Like
Yeah.
admittedly, I didn't have every Beatles album either, not the solo ones anyway.
Yeah.
Um, but at least I could write about it and do some research. And part of the fun is doing the research, going on YouTube and listening to the songs and then commenting on them and that sort of thing, which we did with the Monkees too, of course.
Hmm.
So I'm looking forward to that book, but I don't really have any announcement yet of when it's going to be available. But I'm
Okay.
just letting people know that it's to keep an eye out for it.
Are you just doing albums that charted? Is that basically it, or?
Yes, albums that
Oh,
charted and singles
okay.
that charted because not
Okay.
everything he put out charted,
Right.
especially at more recently. Obviously, he's not a top 40 guy anymore.
Yeah.
But he put out an album called Diamonds, which is like his greatest hits about 10 years ago.
Yep.
It has not left the charts.
Oh,
It is seriously not it's
I
still
knew
there if
it
you
did
check it
well,
right now.
but hey,
Oh my
but
God, you see, here's the list. And then, the top album is Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, got so many points. And then way above that is this greatest hits album because it's been on the charts for so long. So that's number one. I just gave
yeah,
away a
yeah,
secret there.
yeah.
And the number one single, you might guess. Can you guess?
Can I guess? But it wouldn't be the probably Candle in the Wind.
Yes, it is. The
Yeah,
Candle in the Wind version that came out after
the
Jan.
Diana version.
Right. That's the
Okay.
one that stayed on the charts forever.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's the number one single, and the album that's number one is
I
the
mean,
greatest hits
I
album.
almost said your song, and then I say, wait a minute, he had a big one that knocked Mull of
Yeah.
Kintyre and
Yeah,
Band
right. That
Aid and
kind of
everything
thing.
else
Yep.
off, and it was that one, yeah. And
Yes,
to my
indeed.
knowledge, it still has never been put on an album of any sort, even a
No,
greatest
as far as
hits.
I
Yeah,
know, it hasn't.
yeah. So if
Even
you
even
need
with his
it, you have to
greatest
get
hits
that
albums.
CD single thing if you want a physical copy of
Yeah, even on the greatest hits album, he has the Goodbye Yellow Brick Road version of
Yeah.
Candle in the Wind.
And I think he said he'll never put it on any of his albums, and also I don't think he performs that version in concert anymore.
No.
He went back to the Marilyn Monroe version, so
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
um yeah, I know a few things about him that you might not know, but it probably won't make the book anyway. But he did right before some early 70s, late 60s stuff has kind of come out in recent
Yeah.
times,
He did an album. His first album was never released,
Yeah.
and it was called Sergeant. Suddenly, I'm blanking
It
on
is
it.
Regimental Sergeant
That's it. Yeah,
Zippo,
Sergeant.
which is a
And
weird title.
it appeared on the Billboard chart at 100 for 1 week. So that's at
Oh,
the
so it
very
did chart
bottom.
it. Yeah, okay. When it
And
finally did come out.
and
Okay.
because I'm putting the book out, I listened to it, and it's not bad,
No.
but he got better.
Yeah. Yeah. I
It
can
was
see why they
brutal.
shelved it, but it's
Yeah,
surprising that it say shelved for 60 years or whatever it
yeah,
was.
that
Yeah.
was really interesting. But no, I read his biography and I watched the recent movie documentary that just came out on Disney about him.
Yeah.
I'm doing my research,
Okay.
I'm doing my job.
Then the other album, but I don't think this one charted, so it might not make your book, is prior to that, or at least at the same time, before he was getting his record deal and getting the original album Empty Sky in England, not Elton John, folks. It was Empty Sky was the first album in
Correct.
England.
And
Yeah.
that was also not released in America until Your Song was a hit, and it did get
Yeah.
released and it
Yeah.
did make the charts.
Yeah.
Um, but it was like 2 years after it had been recorded. Yes.
Right. Which is
No, it
really
did.
weird because, you think the first album should be eponymous and then he'd already done an album called Empty Sky. Whatever reason,
Yeah.
I don't know. But there's another album that wasn't officially an album, but, you talk about the songs that he did where he was doing cover versions of other artists. And then, um, those would be the proverbial K-Tel albums where it wasn't
Right.
sung by the original artist, but who knew that it would be Elton John singing these?
Right. Well, those aren't, I don't list anything that doesn't have his name on it. So
Oh, okay.
those would not be in my book. In the same way that, he sang backup on other out like John Lennon, he did Whatever Gets You Through the Night. His voice mixes with John's almost perfectly,
Right.
but the album didn't say Elton John and John Lennon, so I didn't list it in my book.
Okay.
Whereas sometimes he did some things, like he did some things with Diana, not Diana Ross, what's her,
Kiki D is one of
Warwick,
them.
Warwick. Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
and Kiki D, right? And those are listed because it says Elton John end. So those
yeah,
are
George
obviously,
Michael, he did one with
yeah, those kind of things. So
lots of
yeah,
duets actually, but those are the two that
right.
came
And
to
well, the
mind.
same
Yeah.
thing I did with my Beatles book,
Okay.
because if their name was listed, it would count, and if their name wasn't listed, they were just singing backup or doing something else. I didn't list it because otherwise, it just too many.
Right.
Elton John has performed on lots of albums, and played
Yeah.
backup and played piano, and just
Well, when they
is
did finally compile all these ones where he's doing cover versions or everything, they did slap his name on huge letters, but I don't think it charted, so it probably wouldn't
no,
make
no,
the
it
book
never
either.
charted.
So yeah, that's what I was asking really. Did it chart? I
Oh,
didn't think so, but I did find it in recent times, and actually his versions aren't too bad. It'd be like, if you just decided to do a covers album back then just for fun,
I haven't heard any, but I've seen the cover, and the cover
yeah.
looks terrible.
Oh, the cover is
It looks
terrible.
like a K-tel cover.
I think I got a later version that they put a nicer photo of
Oh,
him on the
okay.
cover, but the original
Yeah.
one looks like some bad, like cover of
It looks like a
16
bootleg is what it
magazine or
looks like.
something like
Yeah,
that. Just
exactly.
very amateurish. Yeah, I know
Yeah,
what you mean. So,
yeah.
but that was just weird to find out that he did that, but I can understand you got to pay the bills and blah blah blah,
Well,
so
10cc did that too. The band 10cc, they first got started doing bubblegum songs. So, yeah. So a lot of these bands you heard of that did all these crazy little bubblegum songs, it's actually 10cc doing it.
yeah. And
Gotta pay the bills.
yeah, I'm trying to think. I think everything else pretty much charted, or if it didn't chart, it wasn't worth. It's probably not worth
Well, the
mentioning
things
for
that
the
didn't
most part.
chart, so like some of the soundtrack things he did, like
Yeah.
there was that animated film Romeo and
Oh
Juliet.
yeah.
Yeah, it didn't chart.
Oh, okay. Okay. And
Things
then
like that.
and I know there was this Christmas compilation that has a few tracks by
Right.
him that
Yeah, he did a
Starbucks put
Christmas
out,
album
but
that
I don't think it charted either. So
it did not.
so
Although
yeah.
he did a song that's been charting recently, and
A
I can't think
Christmas
of who it's
song?
with.
Oh, okay.
I'm still putting the book together, so I don't have it
All
all
right,
memorized.
all right,
Yeah.
all right. So you know what you're doing, okay? And I've
Yeah.
seen your Beatles book. I have it right here, and so it's interesting when something doesn't chart almost as much as when it does chart because it's like,
Well, that's part
yeah,
of the interesting thing is some of his most famous songs did not chart that high. Tiny Dancer is not a gigantic hit at the time because he
yeah,
wasn't as famous then. But yet you'd always find that on a greatest hits album,
right,
whereas other songs charted much higher that you don't find on a greatest hits album.
yeah,
And it just, and plus he has his favorites. I mean, like there are songs that always show up on the greatest hits albums that never charted very high, but obviously he likes them because he puts them on his greatest hits
yeah,
albums.
yeah. Or maybe make some more money from it. I do know this.
Oh, like
Uh,
he needs money.
yeah, I know, but I do know this that they restructured great well these are probably out of print now because of diamonds but they restructured Greatest Hits Volume 1 and 2
Right.
because Volume 2 had and Volume 3 which became another title because some songs were published by DJM Dick James music,
Yep.
and some songs were published by his own Rocket record label. And when they first put it out, they he was on Rocket, so it was no big deal. You just put both songs. But then later, it's like, wait a minute, you can't do this, and this one went over here, and this one went over here, and so
Damn
it got
lawyers.
totally
Yes.
reconstructed, so they didn't have to pay extra monies anymore, and he could
Yeah.
make more money. So there you go. But anyway,
No, he's
makes
had quite a few greatest hits type of albums came out. And it wasn't until the most recent Diamond ones that really that's the one that really is selling all the time now. And the other
yeah,
ones just sort of fell off because this is a better collection.
yeah. That's pretty much probably going to be the be all end all one. Even though he had that recent hit album, I always forget her
With
name.
Belinda Carlisle,
Yeah,
yeah, he put out that.
yeah.
And what happens nowadays, and this happens with the Beatles as well, is all the fans go out and buy it the first day, so it zooms up. So that one you did with Belinda Carlisle was that like it debuted at number 8.
Right.
And the next week it was like down to 70, and then it was down to 100, and then it disappeared.
Yeah,
And same thing with Ringo. Ringo puts out an album and it zooms up, and then the next week you don't even see it
yeah.
because everyone buys it the first week. It's not like the
Right,
old days when you had to go to the store to get it. Now you can just download it, and so
right.
everyone gets it as soon as they can.
Yeah,
So the charts are so much different than they used to be. I
yeah.
talk about that in the Beatle book. Yeah.
Of course, you can fudge it like McCartney did when he put out McCartney 3 and have 87 versions of McCartney 3 with multicolored vinyls and, all these different versions and everything like that, but
And then he put out an album of people covering McCartney 3.
right, right. So, but anyway, it's a weird way to work, but McCartney seems to dwell on that. I know he's going to put out a new album this year, he says, but
Hmm.
it'll probably be delayed because he typically does that. I've learned this since 1982. He'll say, Tug of War is going to be out in March. Well, it
And
came out in
then,
June.
yeah.
It's like, just to get you all excited and interested, and then by the time it comes out, it's like, but and then the thing that he does, and different artists do this too, it just annoys me, is he'll put out the standard set of 12 tracks, and then you'll have the one with three extra tracks from Target and two other tracks
Yes. Oh, I
over
hate that.
here
The
at
Monkees
Best
did it
Buy,
too.
yeah. And it's like, come on, just put all the
You could
stuff
have fit them
out.
all on there the first time. Come on, that's always frustrating to me. It's one thing when there's an album and there's a limited amount of space you can put on an album, a vinyl
Yeah,
album.
yeah,
But with a CD, you've got like twice, almost twice as much room as you could have on an album.
yeah.
And there's plenty of room to put all that stuff on there.
hmm Are you going to be on Ed Rising's show about the Monkees
I
coming up,
hadn't
or?
planned on it because I don't really have much to say. To me, this
Yeah.
is just
Okay.
packaging again. I could
Yeah.
say, well, it's packaging. And he's got
Well,
plenty of people who are on the show, so I
I
didn't think to add anything.
Okay, well then I'll just tell you, and then if I get on the show, I'll repeat it. But the new Monkees album. We're talking about Monkees again. The new Monkees album is called A's and B's, and my complaint about it is there's nothing new on it to get like a hardcore fan to buy it. Um, and it's kind of you know, a ripoff because they put 12 there's 24 songs that could have easily fit on one CD and it's
Right.
put on two CDs.
Yeah.
But also they didn't cover their entire career. Is for some reason Andrew Sandoval thinks that the Monkees is 66 to 70 and that's it. And it's
Yeah.
like, they were together for 50 years after that. And you even puts out some of their albums. What is this? And so
Look, and it's also the A's and the B's aren't necessarily their best songs
no,
either.
no,
And that's the frustrating part because some of their
right.
better songs were never singles, or certainly
Right.
not. And some of the B-sides weren't necessarily great either.
Right.
It's kind of frustrating. But
Right, but I decided just for fun, and I have a list written down, but I don't need to bring it out now. But is what if you did volume 2 and volume 3? I didn't think I would get two other volumes, but I did, and so I'm going to bring that up just as something to talk about. Um, the super deluxe editions that we mentioned earlier in the show always seem to have a free vinyl single with two
mhm.
songs that'll be a different mix or a different, and sometimes in rare circumstances, a brand new track that's only available on the single. None of them are on the CDs, which frustrates everything out of me because
Mhm.
it's a pain in the neck to pull out the record player just to play this one song if you don't
Yeah,
have YouTube or Spotify or whatever.
right.
And it's like, you know, that they couldn't have slapped it on the end of the CD and just say, well, we'll make a bonus single too just for fun, but
Yeah.
not have it uniquely on there. So,
Well, that's why I'm
uh,
frustrated about it too, because it does seem like it's kind of a bit of a ripoff. It's
so
trying to get the fans to buy something just for the packaging, because there's
my
nothing.
my proposal for A's and B's part two and part three is part two would have all those A's and B's singles that were only on vinyl singles on a CD compilation.
Mhm.
And then, I'm not going to go through all the song tracks, but, I listen. And then the other one would be the A's and B's post 1970, starting with Do It in the Name of Love and,
Yeah,
continuing from there. Because, and you could even put the songs from Dolenz Jones, Voice and Heart,
you
because,
could.
Mickey sang lead and on both of those. And Davey did too on the, what's I forgot the name of the song, but their
You
song
and
from
I.
the You and I is the B side, but yeah, the A side is I can't. I have to look up a
Okay.
list, but anyway,
Yeah.
the Christmas song.
Yeah.
When Good Times came out, they put out an EP that was only on vinyl. When the Christmas
Yeah.
album came out, they put out an EP that's only on vinyl. All that stuff could be compiled as an A's and B's 3. And since there was never an official single off of Just Us, I picked the two songs that they actually made music videos for at that
Hmm.
time, saying, well, that would be the de facto single had they pressed a single. And I also did the same thing for Good Times, even though there's Good Times Plus, you know. You Bring the Summer and the other one that they did, they made videos for those. That should have
Yeah.
been a single too, and do
Well,
another and bring the A's and B's up to date,
what
instead
they
of
really
stop.
needed to do, there was that two CD set, or I guess it was three CD set that came out a while ago, on the 50th
Yeah,
anniversary.
yeah,
And I remember complaining about it because they could have easily fit many, many more songs on that.
yeah,
Yeah, and that's the only problem. I think they need to do another one, uh,
yeah,
just two CDs with everything on it, and I
yeah.
think that would be a good collector's item.
Even though you don't like it for that reason, it's actually my favorite compilation because it's the most complete. It's the most
Yes, it is.
comprehensive.
No, no,
Could they fit
I
more? Of
like
course
the
they could, but
compilation,
yeah, yeah,
but it's lacking. There's
yeah,
still so much room that they could have put more stuff on,
right, right.
Anyway.
And, again, my compilation would have That Was Then, This Is Now, and all that stuff, Heart and Soul, and all those ones. But anyway,
Well, that was then, this
eh,
was now was a very good compilation at the time. It
yeah,
really was. It was the first time we got a lot of songs on CD, which was wonderful.
right. So,
Anyway.
I think the A's and B's is a big missed opportunity. They could have done a big, nice deluxo 60th anniversary and included a lot of these tracks that were never officially on CD before. They were only on vinyl, or they were only on a CD-ROM is one of the tracks that I would put,
Well, I
or
remember I got the Turtles version, all the singles. Do
yeah,
you have that CD?
yes, I
And I was
love that
very
one.
first. It was good because it had all these songs that I'd never had before.
Yeah,
Have you heard the cows? Whatever, all that
yeah,
stuff.
yeah,
What I didn't like about it is they did it as it was originally released, which meant most of those songs were in mono. And I'm thinking, no, I want to hear the stereo versions, especially some of those stereo songs, you know, Sound Asleep just doesn't work in mono. It needs to be in
yeah.
stereo,
Yeah,
for
it was the
instance.
singles version. They probably should have done like a mono version and a stereo version, but who
I
knows?
that's why I was frustrated with it because
Yeah,
it's like, yeah, I got it and I said, oh, good, I'm going to have really good copies. It's going to be the best copies because it's all remastered, and it was all
yeah,
mono. And I was like, oh,
yeah,
frustrating.
yeah. Well, at least they did remaster in recent times the albums themselves. So I mean, you can get the stereo versions there. So that's what I would recommend. So
Mm,
you know,
all right,
um,
I did not know that. So
yeah,
I
they came out in a little
because
slip case and everything. I don't know if it's still in print, but I got mine pretty cheap. But yeah, the sound, if you have any version from the past of the CDs, the sound is night and day. I mean,
oh, really?
it really sounds sharp on the
Because
is
my favorite of theirs is still the Battle of the Bands is an
yeah,
excellent, excellent album. I still listen to that quite
yeah.
often.
So
That
I'd
and Turtle Soup.
recommend getting Happy Together, Battle of the Bands, and Turtle Soup, and that would get all the later stuff
Yeah,
because
I'm more interested in that. I agree.
yeah,
And Turtle Soup is another one that I thought was poorly produced.
yeah.
And I think if you had it remixed, it might sound a lot better. Yeah.
Right. And I think all the bonus tracks in that are from the unofficially released Shell Shock, so it
Oh,
has the
okay.
very last stuff that they did.
I remember seeing
Yeah.
that. I
Yeah.
never got that, but I remember seeing
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
So, yeah, all that stuff is good top-notch stuff. But I talk about it in my Turtles book if you
Yeah, I read the Turtle
were.
books. Don't worry.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, we're just doing plug here.
Oh yeah,
Anyway,
I have to remember to bring it because I got Charles to sign it. Now I got to get you to sign it.
okay.
The Turtles book. Yeah.
Well, Charles made these up. He actually made postcards, which I have a few left. I can bring him where we both signed because
Oh yeah.
He brought him to England. And he says, "Here, sign here." So I signed my name. We could actually do the same thing. He's like, if you get some postcard, or if you do you have postcards for the Monkeys books? I don't think I ever got any.
I do have some for the first book. I don't have any for the second book.
Okay.
I think I still have some left over.
Well, bring the ones for the first book at least if you have any
Yeah.
left, and then we can both sign them. And so, and then
Okay.
take our
Sure.
shares back to us and have something to slip in the book because I still sell copies of this on eBay, but I always say I'll sign it. If you want Michael's, you gotta go find him.
I always take I do a lot of science fiction conventions for my novels, of course.
Mhm.
And I always bring the Beatles and the Monkees books with me because you never know. And I do sell them every now and then. People go, "Oh
Yeah.
yeah." And then, so might as well, right? I always wonder if I should bring all my other books with me when I come to the the Monkees convention, or I should only bring my Beatles book with me, maybe.
I think
I don't think it'd be right necessarily to bring my novels, which have nothing to do with the Beatles or the Monkees. Although
you have one
I could
novel.
bring
Yeah.
this.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, bring that one. You
This
might
is
get a
an
few.
anthology of Beatles stories written by a lot of famous science fiction writers
Yeah.
who are all Beatles fans. I will bring that.
Yeah, I'd bring that one because
Yeah.
that one kind of have you seen Charles' book? Uh
Which one?
he has top 10 horror list and the top
Oh
10
yeah, well
Beatles tracks.
I
Yeah.
was I laid those out. I was
Oh,
the
okay, I forgot
artistic.
that. That's
So
right.
yes, I
Okay.
definitely have seen those books.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, well, he's
So,
going to bring those obviously
yeah,
because
I
it's
mean,
yeah,
so I mean,
yeah,
the horror stuff is pretty fringe, but it's still you got Pete Best in there and stuff like that. So
yeah,
hey,
true.
I think you got Mickey to do one of the horror lists, if I remember correctly,
Yep,
for
he
Monkeys.
did. Yep,
So I don't remember
he
all the
did,
people, but
and the Beatles book too. Yep.
and he didn't get Howard Kaylan, although he asked him many times, and he never.
Howard's weird. He
Yeah,
doesn't.
yeah,
Yeah, he doesn't always respond. I know. Yeah, yeah. I mean, he
but
did a great interview with me, but that was like 12 years ago.
yeah.
I've hardly talked
Well,
to him.
obviously with the Turtles book, we managed to get what we think is the final interview with him because, and that was with Plastic and Charles,
Yeah,
and it's only because we kept bugging him and bugging him and bugging him, and it's like, so he finally did it. And then the funny thing come when the book comes out, the Turtles and Flo and Eddie webpage on Facebook says, "Don't buy pirate books by pirates." And it's like, come on, guys. It's like this is the first book written by a fan instead of you two
yeah.
telling your same stories over again, and it's like,
Well,
and
did you read the Mark Volman book?
I did. It was a disappointment from the
No.
standpoint that, he had very little of his own commentary. It was everybody else's, so
No, oh, it's too bad. No,
yeah.
I haven't read it.
Oh,
That's
you
all.
haven't read it? Yeah, it's just quotes. It'll be like talking about the Battle of the Bands. It'll be like, I mean, fortunately, you got quotes from like Al Nickel, who never gets interviewed half the time. But it's like there's very little Mark Volman, and now Mark's
Hmm.
gone. So,
Yeah,
the best Turtles book out there, other than our own, is probably Howard's. But
yeah. Oh, that was a
uh,
fun book to
the
read.
only
Yeah.
thing about Howard's, and this is when I was doing our Turtles book, is Howard has this uncanny knack of embellishing the truth sometimes to his favor, and it's not necessarily right, It's like, it's probably how he remembered it, sure. It was 60 years ago or whatever, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Well,
like,
that's kind of true of all biographies in some
y-
ways.
yeah.
I can imagine that.
And so I'm not gonna knock all the wild parties and orgies he had behind the scenes because I wasn't there. But when he's saying actual facts about how the band broke up, and they made it sound like the band was broken up for months when then they joined Zappa. It was probably less than 2 weeks.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah.
granted,
And,
when you're in your 20s and you're out of work, it can seem like a decade if you're out of work for 2 weeks, but still, you know.
no, yeah, and well, and there was the whole issue with he kind of left the band for a while during Turtle Soup.
Yeah,
and came back again, and he hardly even mentions that in his book, if
yeah.
I remember
And he
correctly.
certainly didn't mention in that Rhino documentary, which is still excellent. But, it's like, wow, why wouldn't you mention that? That seems like a significant thing, but
Yeah.
he
Hmm.
didn't seem to think so. So out it goes. So,
Yeah, well.
but in my Turtles book, Charles and my Turtle book, somewhere along the line, I mentioned 10 things that are incorrect in the Turtles anthology documentary. However, I still recommend it highly because don't let these 10 reasons keep you from
Mm.
watching it. It's still like one of the best documentaries on a rock band ever, but just little minor quibblings and, typos and things like that. They typed the wrong year in one spot and blah, blah, blah,
Oh yeah, yeah.
things like that. You know,
Oh, I see that happen with Beatles all the time too.
yeah.
Or
And
apparently on the Monkees, there's so many different
yeah,
articles on the Monkees that are just completely wrong. And you go,
yeah.
oh. So,
And they basically act like Lady-O was the last thing they performed, and they wanted to leave a good taste in the mouth with White Whale and everything. Makes a nice, cleaned up, sanitized story. But when you interview people like Jerry Esther, who says I was producing the album, and then White Whale ran out of money, and so we just kind of stopped mid-song. Uh, you know,
mhm.
uh, basically, they were recording the next album, the Shell Shock album, and didn't get it finished, and he never got paid. And it's like, oh well, but it doesn't make for a good
No.
uh, documentary to say, hey, we cheated our producer. But as an outsider like me, I can say, hey, that was an interesting time. I don't pass judgment on it. It's just what happened. It's like, just not so glamorous,
No, no. Sometimes, the truth isn't necessarily the most interesting story.
you know. And I found that on other books I've written. Dennis the Menace story about how Hank Ketcham's wife died. Hank Ketcham's the creator of Dennis the Menace, if you don't know.
Right.
But for those out there who don't, so he always said his wife died of a drug overdose. So it turned out she died of a brain hemorrhage while she was transporting two other friends. And she didn't die immediately. They went to the hospital and she died like the next day. But uh, I think it looked better if he said that she died of a drug overdose because he got remarried very quickly after that, but because he's already seeing this new person. Yeah. Anyway, but
You
that
get to be a
uh,
famous comic book artist, and what happens? It
yeah,
goes to
scandal. Yes. Anyway, um, well, that's close to animation. You mentioned animation. What were you going to say about animation?
Oh no,
That's
it's
one
just
of
that
our
you and I have
topics.
both written books about animation and written, things about animation. I just thought if you
Okay.
wanted to talk about that, given
Well,
we both have a similar background in that way.
well,
But there's
there is a
nothing
book.
specific I wanted to talk about, just in case you wanted to discuss it.
Well, I can because give me maybe the get up and go to actually finish this book. You know, um, I agreed to do a book after all the Turtles and the Mad magazine book and all this crazy magazine book, and it's still not done, and I'm not even working on it now, but it's sitting there, and I want to get it done. It's called TV Cartoons That Time Forgot. And I got our buddy Scott Shaw to do a new cover. I even paid
No.
him. I even paid him decently this time.
Mhm.
And basically, it's about all the also ran companies that did TV animation, mainly during the 50s, 60s, 70s, not much later than that,
Mhm.
that uh, don't have books about them already. So there's not going to be Hanna-Barbera or Filmation or,
Right.
the big ones or the ones I've already done, like DePatie Freeling. In fact, I'll even have it as a guide in there. If you want to read more about DePatie Freeling, there's this book. If you want to read about
Right.
Hanna-Barbera, there's these books, and
Mhm.
stuff like that. So I'm talking about like the company that put out like the Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends and
Mhm.
those Marvel superhero cartoons. The company Cambria that put out the Three Stooges cartoons and
Oh
Clutch
God.
Cargo,
Uh,
and I mean, some of it's crap, but people
yeah.
remember it fondly. So, the company that Hal Seeger Productions that put out a few different shows, Batfink and Milton the Monster and things like that. So,
Yeah.
so I pared it down, and it's still 15 studios, and it's kind of be like the TV cartoon version of Mice and Magic, because I'm kind of seeing, okay, they did Disney, and then they did Warner Brothers, and then they did MGM, and then they
right?
did Terry Toons, and and it's like, yeah, but I'm working on it by myself, which is fine. I'm not saying I need a writing partner. It's just that, man, it's a lot of information. I don't know how they did of Mice and Magic. I guess Malton said, Jerry, go, research. And it was probably harder then to get all that research for all those different studios because there was no internet and
Yeah.
everything else. So I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. I remember Might and Magic was when I was in college, I took a course on animation, and
Hmm.
that was our textbook, Might and Magic, believe it or not.
Oh, cool.
It was taught by Steve Siegel, who later went on to work at Pixar and on Toy Story and a couple other things, and he's still out in LA somewhere, or working on more animation stuff that he's working on. So that was really cool, and that's how I really started getting into animation, was taking that course, I think, because that's what I learned all about Tex Avery and how to tell the difference between Tex Avery and Chuck Jones and how to identify all the cartoonists. Uh, and then of course I started the animation magazine after that.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's how I got into it for that book. That was a very important book to me. So if you can write a book similar, you're in good shape.
Yeah, it's just what to keep and what to leave out and everything like
Yeah.
that. The cutoff is Ruby Spears, just because of the nature of how things go. But um, and there's others I might cut out just because there's just not that much information about it. I mean, the hard part about starting on a book like this now, a lot of these people are gone, and it's like, that was the fortunate thing about when I did my total television book and even the Patty Freeling book is a lot of these guys are still around and they still have their
You could
marbles
talk to them.
and
Yeah,
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 you know, but even then, some of them were like I interviewed Alan Swift, and it was basically useless interview because he was already losing it, and it's like
mm.
he basically just kind of said, "I voiced those characters. Yep, yep, that's what I did." And it's like, great, I knew that,
Yeah.
So,
Oh, yeah. Well, are you talking about some of the TV specials as well, or just the show? I mean,
um,
like the Christmas specials and things like that were done by specific studios. They didn't necessarily have a series.
yeah, only I had to cut that a lot of that stuff out. So if they did a Christmas special and they did a series, then it's in there. But if they
Okay.
only did specials, I think Bill Melendez makes the cut because they did a couple series too somewhere along the line.
Right,
So
they did the Peanut series after a while.
yeah,
Yeah, I
so
remember that.
well, even Charlie Brown and Snoopy Show was a series, so that gives me
Yeah,
carte blanche to say, hey, well, they did all these TV specials too, you know.
yeah,
And but if they, and especially it makes it hard, and this is where I had to cut. If it's some studio that made some obscure one-off special back in 1974, and that's the only thing they ever did, nobody even
yeah,
remembers it. It's like, well, it's going to be cut, know.
yeah. I
You
understand.
know,
Yeah,
but so I got it down to 15 studios. It may cut more, but anyway, it's going pretty good. But I just kind of stopped when I started working on another project I'm working on, which is about Disney live action directors.
yeah. You did mention that. I
Yeah,
remember
and that
hearing about
one
that.
even is getting slow. But I think it's just because after 20 years of churning out books, my desire to work on a book all the time has kind
Oh
of
yeah, no
diminished.
one's getting rich off of this stuff. Those of
Yeah,
you who are
yeah,
watching,
yes,
this is not our living making the
yeah,
books. I've my 27th book is coming out in a few months,
right.
and that's a lot of books, but they're not all, top big sellers.
And then I don't know if I've told you this directly, but I will now, so you'll hear it. You've gone on record as saying, during COVID and the pandemic, it just was like writer's block for you and just was like, I couldn't do anything. I was like the total opposite. I was like a writing fool, and it was like, all right. And so the result of my labors is that in 2024, the Mad book came out, the Turtles book came out, the Crazy book came out, and other books came out before or after that. Well, nothing's come out after. The plot book is coming out next, but they're still working on it. But
Mhm.
it's like, there's just this mad rush to do all this stuff because I had no time to do anything else. So, and now that everything's quote back to normal, it's like, I'm just like, I'm too tired to work on
Nah.
a
Well, I've got
book.
the next book coming out is actually a book about writing advice for people who want to write fiction and things I've learned. It's
Yeah,
called Learn from My Mistakes.
yeah.
And that's coming out. And then I've got two anthologies that are with an agent now that's trying to sell them to hopefully a big publisher.
Mm.
I'm working on a new novel, a science fiction novel with lots of humor in it because I all my books have lots of humor in it. And then there's the Elton John book. So I've got all these projects going on, but none of them have deadlines. So
Yeah,
I keep going back and forth from one to the other, you know.
yeah. I think that's what's slowing me down too, is none of them have deadlines. It's like,
I
uh,
kind
the,
of need that. I got hired to do a book 2 years ago,
yeah,
and it's great. They said, get it done by this date and we'll pay you. I got it done.
yeah,
That sometimes I need that, I think, you know.
yeah. Well, for me, a good deadline is if I don't have anything kind of in the hopper, and so I still work with Bear Manor, even though I've had reservations at times about them, but they're doing pretty good lately with me. The issue is now they lost some of their artists, some of their graphic artists, probably for good reason, but so the next book that I had finished, which is about the comic book Plop that DC did back in the
Sure, I remember.
70s, uh, is only being worked on now. So worked on meaning, they're actually setting it, the photos and formatting it
Mhm.
and doing all that production stuff that, is all that wonderful stuff. Now that can go really quickly or it can go really slowly, but
Well, you
eh,
know my thoughts about them when they screwed up our monkeys book,
yeah,
and I had to redo it myself,
yeah,
um, and so and of course, and I did all of Charles's books too because he also didn't want them. He was afraid they were going to mess it up
yeah,
for
yeah,
him. And your Turtles book, I was not really impressed with the layout in that either.
yeah.
Um, yeah, I'm not sure who did that, but that was
That
not too
they did
impressive.
that, Genius did, but
Yeah.
know.
It was a good
uh,
read, but it didn't look. The good
yeah.
thing was all color. That I loved.
Well, and that's
Yeah,
that's even a hard version of the book to find now. Yeah, it's
yeah,
now in black
I
and white.
understand.
So if you have a
So
color
I've
one,
got a color version, so I'm
keep
happy.
the color version. Yeah. Um, but so they're working on it now. I didn't give them too much specifics on layout, except for one thing that I'm reprinting is basically it's not true, but I call it the lost issue of Plop. Do you ever get Squatront
No, I don't know
magazine?
what they're.
Okay. Squatront is a phrase from Weird Science comic book, and it's one of the EC comic books like Tales from the
Hmm.
Crypt and all that stuff. So you know that much.
I know that. Yeah.
Okay. It was originally a fanzine done like in the 60s and 70s, and then in recent times Fantagraphics picked up and did a few more issues. In one of the issues, they uh Harvey Comic wait, let's back up a bit. Harvey Comics did a Mad comic book ripoff back in the 50s called Flip, and it only lasted two issues.
That enough for me.
Um, but it uh Harvey and EC are very similar in the early 50s. Harvey did a bunch of horror comics like Tales from the Crypt, but they're called Witch's Tales and Black Cat Mystery and things like that. They did their own version of Mad called Flip, but they only did two issues because it didn't sell. But they, it's like everything else. There was enough material to do a third issue. It just never was put out.
Hmm.
So in one of the Squatront fanzine issues, they reconstructed what issue three would look like.
Hmm.
Okay. So based on that, I said, that's kind of a neat idea. And then uh Dark Horse did it recently. Harvey Kurtzman did a magazine called Trump, no relation to
Right.
anything
I
going
remember
on
that
now.
one.
And he did two issues, no problem. Then Hugh Hefner pulled the plug, and there was no issue three, but there was enough material. So when Dark Horse put together this book, they reprinted one and two exactly as is, and then put together kind of a reconstructed issue three.
Okay.
And so for my plot book, they did 23 issues way back when in the 70s. Um, and but over the course of the time that Plop was being published, there were stories that appeared in fanzines like Amazing World of DC Comics, and just never got published for whatever reason. And there was enough material to actually make another issue, and so I'm basically that's the center thing. So for
No.
me, talking to the production people, I want these full size, not
Mm,
postage stamp, but
yep.
we'll see what I get.
Good luck with that. Now,
So,
Plop is the one that Sergio Aragonés used to draw stuff for, right?
yes, yeah,
Yes. Okay. That's and I know that. And the Harvey Kurtzman stuff. I have the Harvey Kurtzman book, that they put out a while ago, the hardcover,
yeah,
and it mentions a lot of the Trump stuff in there as well.
right,
So, yeah, I'm familiar with it. I don't have any copies, but I'm learning about it in retrospect. I didn't have any at the date when it came out,
yeah.
that kind of stuff. So,
Right. Now,
just
Plop's pretty easy to get cheaply. Unfortunately, they really need to reprint it. DC should put like a compilation out.
yeah, that'd be
Maybe they
wonderful.
will, maybe they won't, but it's like if it's not superhero, nobody cares. At
Yeah,
least that's what they think, I
yeah.
care and I would love to see it, but the one thing that's a fortunate thing is I got Sergio to do an interview with me.
Oh, excellent.
He didn't want to have it on Zoom like we're doing as a podcast. So I said, fine, I had to be amenable to it. But it is recorded, so, it's like someday maybe. You know, anyway, but it is transcribed in the book. And he talked about everything. And he went much length about plot because he never really talked about it in interviews. Most people just ask about Mad,
Right.
or his basic history, Gru,
Brew, yeah.
whatever. But that's about it. They're not going to talk about Plop, but he loved Plop. He uh was sad to see it go. Part of the reason it went is just because, it was kind of like, oh, it kind of ran its course.
Yeah.
And it was an expensive thing to do because the first 10 issues are ad free. And they thought that would make it appealing and more like Mad, but they didn't
Right.
charge any more for it. So, they lost money. And so they switched it to a monthly schedule instead of bi-monthly with ads, but it didn't help. you know.
Mhm.
And so, after 24 issues or whatever, it went away. It was 24 issues. I said 23 earlier, it's 24. Anyway, so and then what happened around the same time is he revealed, I don't know if you remember this in the late 70s, is Sergio got like semi-interest in working television,
Right.
and they did a series of laugh-in specials without Rowan and Martin, but George Slaughter was still producing them. And
Right.
I think you can find him online now. He's been pushing him. And Sergio became a cast member. He was originally supposed to just do little animations,
Hmm.
and they needed like a Mexican general to do the firing squad in some skit. And they go, "Hey, you look like you could do." And so he had to get his actor's card and everything. And he had done some acting in the past. He said
Hmm.
so, you know, those exist just because of that. And it's like, it's kind of weird, funny, but he explained all that. That's kind of what helped end Plop, but he got a few different TV and movie roles after that. So yeah. There we go.
All right. Well, I'll
Uh,
look forward to reading that. That'll be interesting.
yeah, so hopefully that'll come out later this year. It might even be ready by September when yeah,
I liked your monkey book. I wish it had more
my monkey
graphics
book.
inside it. No, I'm sorry, your Mad book. Your Mad book.
Yeah,
Books, I should say, not book.
yeah.
Um, but it's frustrating to read it and not see it, but I
Yeah,
understand you
well,
couldn't get the
there
rights to this
there's a
stuff,
reason for that because I
Of
mean it's
course.
one of the few times that a lawyer came breathing down my neck and I had to make a few changes. So that's why I like the logo on the cover is not the official Mad logo. They really
Right.
said no,
Yeah.
and they said that's a trademark logo, and we don't put that logo on unauthorized pieces. Although this is kind of interesting, pull this off the shelf here. This book came out, and I don't think this one was authorized, and they just kind of hand drew a logo that kind of looks like the real thing, but
Hmm.
I don't
Yeah.
know. It's like I think it just they pick and choose their battles, and they probably figured, well, this guy's telling our history. We can't have that. And it's like,
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
who knows?
And again, like, with Howard Kalin, it's like I'm not trying to tell the history to you know, hurt anyone. It's basically putting the truth out there that, you
Hmm.
know, and it's not sanitized for your protection or omitted for your protection or whatever for your protection. I'm a fan, so I should
But
be able to write
I can
about it.
understand,
Yeah.
people who own, they have an image they want to keep
Yeah.
and they want to control it. And I can sort of understand that, but
Yeah.
at the same time, they can't legally stop you from writing it. They can only stop you
Yeah.
from using their copyrighted stuff.
Yeah. And so they were fine with me using covers. They were not really fine with me using uh pages of content, you know.
Mhm.
And the only reason why I said I was amenable to that is I said, well, Mads are pretty easy to come by. It's not like they're impossible and they're being
Oh yeah,
reprinted all the time.
there's
So,
plenty of collections everywhere you
so
can.
yes, if it's starting to talk about a particular fold in and I don't have it reprinted in the book, well, go down to your local store and you probably find a book that has it reprinted in there, or you can
Yeah,
find
yeah,
it online or something like that. So,
yeah,
you know.
definitely.
And there is a digital Mad set that came out, so the
Right.
first like 500 issues or something. So there we go. But yeah, I understand. But I did also kind of want to put the images of who worked on Mad, which
Yeah.
that that was a tough thing to do because some people they don't have photos.
Mhm.
One kind of pissed me off is I couldn't find a photo of Jack Rickard, and so I put a picture of him, a self drawing,
Drawing, yeah.
self-portrait. Uh, then after the book came out, somebody had posted a picture of Jack Rickard online, and it's like, well, I could switch it out, but the book's already published. But
Uh-huh.
it's like, where did that come from? It's like,
No, well,
mm,
that happened to me with the Monkees book too. Especially with the headquarters book, I did a lot of searching trying to find pictures that matched what we were writing about.
right,
And a lot of it just couldn't find anything. And
yeah,
then somehow I'm on these Monkees pages on Facebook and people, oh, here's a picture of, Mickey was in this play and went, oh, I wish I'd had that, months ago.
right,
Anyway.
yeah.
Well,
Well,
Headquarters is another book that we will update.
I was gonna say we could update that one,
Well,
just for
not
the
until Mickey's gone,
just for the passage of years, but also, if we left anything out on,
Yeah,
the
true.
earlier
Yeah, I'm
years.
sure there are things that
Yeah.
we probably missed, but we won't do that. And as long as Mickey's still around,
Yeah.
once
Yeah.
he's gone, then the story is over, and we can,
Yeah.
yeah.
Don't go.
No, I don't. No,
Stay many
definitely.
years, Mickey. Show up to the
No, no.
convention.
Mickey is an amazing.
No.
You know, my wife is not a gigantically huge Monkeys fan. She likes them, but she's not like me. She doesn't know everything about them.
Yeah.
But she is astounded at how good Mickey's voice still sounds after all these years. So whenever we go to the concert, she's just, oh my God, I can't believe how good he sings.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Well,
so,
they haven't really said that of people I've brought, but every time I bring someone, it's like the Monkees, Mickey Dolenz, and then it's like he's good,
yeah.
So it's like, it's like, hey, yeah, he can
Yeah.
sing, he has the pipes,
Yeah.
he's not just circus boy, it's
Right.
like, he had a little bit of a vocal talent, and still
Mhm.
does, and
Yep.
he didn't ruin his voice like McCartney or something like
Or
that,
Nielsen. Yep. Mhm.
yeah, and
No, that's the keys. Mickey was an actor first, and he grew up knowing that you have to take care of your voice if you want to be an actor.
yeah,
And that's something that I think a lot of rock stars don't do.
right,
They smoke and drink and ruin their voice. And I always think of Harry Nilsson because he
yeah,
had such
yeah,
a beautiful voice, and by the end, he just sounded terrible.
oh yeah.
I mean, he still hit the notes, but his voice was
Yeah.
just not
Well, it was in
smooth.
Mickey's whole family. I mean, Coco was a good singer. The
Yep.
dad was he did what Mickey calls light opera,
Yep.
some enchanted evening, that type of
Mhm.
stuff. And
Yep.
loves to tell those stories, but it's like when he does it, he sings it, he belts it out full voice.
Hmm.
So it's like, yeah, he knows what he's doing, and it's like, yeah, he can be 80 years old, but like one thing that impressed me recently is uh Barbara Streisand did a duets album. I think she did a couple of them, but the most recent one, and
Hmm.
she did a duet with Mr. McCartney, and
Hmm.
unfortunately, she sang circles around him because I
Yeah.
mean she knows how to do the voice control and
Of
everything else.
course. That's
She still sounds like she did when she was 30.
You
It's
take care of your
like
voice. That's what happens. Paul just Paul just smokes too much, and
Yeah.
I'm not talking about tobacco. He just
Yeah.
smokes too much.
Yeah. Well, he
And
says he's quit, but I mean, I think it was too late,
yeah,
it's like, and unfortunately, and it also, I mean, I can complain about Paul because I don't think I'll ever meet him. So it's like,
yeah,
what's he gonna do? Hey,
yeah.
don't
And
make
Paul
fun of my
Simon too.
voice.
We
Uh,
saw Paul Simon recently. He had a lot of trouble hitting those high notes, and it's kind
yeah.
of embarrassing in some ways.
But in the case of McCartney, I've taken singing lessons. I used to be in choir and stuff like that.
Hmm.
The thing is, you don't sing with your throat. You have to sing with your diaphragm. It's always
Exactly.
the joke, It's like, how does she take that? How does she do that? It'd take years to learn what that's the Steve
Yeah,
Martin
yeah,
joke, you know.
yeah.
Uh, but anyway, it's like it does make a difference. And, if I'm going to sing something, even singing along with the radio or sing properly, you know, I got to make sure to get the breath so I'm not all up
Yeah,
here,
yeah. No,
yeah,
exactly. No, I've been in lots of bands, and I've taken singing lessons as well. So
yeah,
I know what you're talking about. I was never the lead singer in the band, though. I was always background.
yeah.
Sadly, I didn't have the beautiful voice that I wanted.
All right. And what I found on singing, and so more kudos to Mickey Dolenz and anybody in their 70s and 80s that still goes out there and does it. It's like if I'm singing along with an album, I might make it through half the album and then, all right, that's enough, and just drive around with the rest of the album playing, but these people go out and do 3 hours a night, for
Yeah.
months,
Hmm.
how do they do that, and it's like,
You
uh,
got to admire them.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. So, and Mickey doesn't really even play anything, so he's just singing and talking. It's all voice, like other groups that are older, they can cover it up with a long ass guitar solo or whatever, or drum solo,
Yeah.
but or in the case of like Ringo, he can say, "All right, now everybody else is going to sing, and I'm going to go back to
Yep.
backstage and just sit down and drink some water," But
Yeah.
but anyway,
Oh, I'd love to. I still love to see him in concert someday. I've never seen Paul or Ringo in concert.
really,
No,
Ringo
it's always so
Ringo's
expensive.
pretty easy to see, but
Yeah, it's all very expensive.
he's fluctuated in price. When I saw Ringo the last time, he did come to Eugene. This is 2023, I think,
Hmm.
and I I was only gonna go just because my wife had never seen a Beatle,
Right.
and I said, well, Ringo's the cheaper of the two, but he's still kind of expensive. This is going to be a lot. And then I guess they were having trouble selling tickets or something. Maybe it was because of the tail end of the pandemic, and they slashed the prices like in half. And I said, all right, I'm going,
Oh, that's nice.
you know. And he was a sellout. So, I don't know if they really needed to do that, but they did do that at the time, and it's like, okay. Um, the
I've just
funny,
gotten to the point where I don't like when I go to concerts, I like to hear the music. And too often I'm sitting behind someone who jumps up and sings along, and I'm going, I didn't come to hear you. I want to see the concert.
right,
And so I tend to not want to go to big, huge halls where there's lots of people, and the guy is way up on the screen and I can hardly
right,
see them. To me, that's not what it's all about. It's about being in a small club and being next to the music.
right.
And so I tend to not go to these big, huge shows. On the other hand, there's a lot of artists I've seen in small places that I've really, really liked because it was small and intimate, you know?
Yeah. I will say this about Ringo. Well, he played in one of those amphitheaters, and I've seen him elsewhere. Is where it's there's seats in the front, and then people sit on the grass in the back.
Oh
Now,
yeah, okay, yeah.
not everybody's into that, sitting on the grass. The funny thing was, we did do the grass, so that's why it was so cheap. Also, on those,
Yeah.
you pay more if you're up at the front. But you know. Everybody in the grass around me when they're getting up because we're all old. Like,
Mhm. Well, that's the thing. You know,
like
I go
that.
to these concerts.
I
I go to
mean,
see Mickey. I went to
yeah,
see,
yeah,
the Tubes one
yeah,
time, and I went to
yeah,
see Sparks. Well,
yeah,
Sparks not so much anymore, but
yeah.
it's like, look at all these old people. Oh, wait, that includes me.
Yeah. But anyway, everybody's getting up like that. Meanwhile, Ringo's on the stage doing jumping jacks.
Well,
So
that's true. Yeah.
so he is amazing. I don't know what sort of portrait of Dorian
It,
Gray is
it's
in his
no,
attic,
he
but it's like,
back in the 90s when he cut out alcohol and tobacco and became a strict vegetarian. That's all. I think that's a lot of it.
yeah,
Take care of yourself, and that's what's going to happen.
yeah. There's this different Australian guy, not plastic. His name's Elliot something. I can't think of his last name, but he has kind of long George. He kind of looks like George Harrison somewhat.
Hmm.
And he does a podcast where he talks about Beatles and everything. I'll recommend this one just because it's very historical and it is he the rankings of all the Beatles solo albums. Now the John, Paul, and George ones are around 2 hours long. Okay, bit of a length. He did Ringo 4 hours. Now,
Wow.
it's an interesting 4 hours because I mean he goes talks about a few albums. He talks about like his duds at the beginning because he goes from lowest to highest. So
Yep.
he obviously ends on the high note of Ringo. Everybody knows that album is going to be number
Right.
one for most people. And but somewhere along the line he makes these little diversions. This is why it was 4 hours. He talks about Ringo's movie career. He talks about Ringo's sobriety.
Hmm.
Talks about Ringo's ventures into children's television and advertising and all sorts of different things. And it's fascinating. And it's like it made it work. It took me like 3 days to watch it all because it's four
Yeah.
hours long, and I can't just sit there 4 hours just watching Ringo, you know.
Right.
But and he's informative like we try to be in our books and stuff like that. So I recommend it. But yeah, he did say that basic exact same thing is once he finally decided to give up the drink, you know, that's where his life changed. And,
Yes.
he shed years off his life in a good way, not bad way, you know.
Hmm.
So that's why he's with us at 85 years old, or whatever, you know.
Hmm.
So anyway, I recommend
Yeah.
that
And
book.
of course, Paul's a vegetarian as well,
Yeah,
but he did smoke much, much too
yeah,
much for many years, and I think that had a lot to do with his problems as well.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I kind of worried about that years ago. Not that I could do anything. You say, Paul, learn, learn from your mistakes. But even when he came back on the road in '89, which is the first time I saw Paul, when he would sing stuff like Jet, where he goes, Jet, like that, he was already hoarse just
Yeah.
doing that, and it's like you got to figure out a better way to do that so you're not tearing up your throat every night shouting Jet,
Yeah.
or don't play Jet, but
Yes.
you know, but uh and then like in more recent time, the most embarrassing thing is one of those Saturday Night Live
I remember
uh
I was
he
thinking
did
the
Maybe
exact
I'm
same thing.
Amazed, and it's like, no, don't do this one. And
Uh,
he was fine for about two-thirds of the songs, and then he was getting to the end where it's the real high notes, and he his voice cracked, and it's like, "Arr!"
yeah.
And everybody else says, oh, it's wonderful. It's like, no, it's shit.
Yeah.
I gotta go back and listen to the original record to get that bad sound out of my head, so
Yeah, yeah, it's sad. Well, part of the problem is we're all getting old, you
yeah.
know.
So,
Yeah.
that's the hard part
At
about
least he's
seeing,
still around and he's still performing. You got to give
right?
him that.
That's the hard part about seeing McCartney now. Yeah. Yeah. I'm thinking, I used to say I'll probably never see him again because I've already seen him 5 times. But, if he did come around here, it might be tempting, even if it was like $500 a ticket. But it's like I have to go in knowing that he's not going to sound good,
Right. You're
you
going
know.
just to see him, you know.
Yeah.
And that's the
And
key. Is that maybe I just can't bring myself to pay that much money for a
yeah.
concert.
Yeah. So I don't know if I will either. I just
Yeah.
jokingly say this because it's been kind of a running gag for a while there. Ringo made it out here, like I said, you go a couple years ago to Eugene. But most artists of these, you know, older ages now, whatever,
Mhm.
they don't tour the Northwest. They might go to Seattle, they
Hmm.
might go to San Francisco, but they certainly don't go to Oregon anymore. And if they do, they go to Portland. But even Portland, they kind of skip over. And it's like, you know,
Interesting.
fortunately, the last time I saw Mickey was when he did the album that 7A Records released with the orchestra behind him.
Yeah,
And
you mentioned that. You saw that.
yeah,
Yeah.
so I'm very happy because I think that was the last time he was out here. And,
Oh, that's interesting.
monkeys or otherwise, and
Well, see,
how many
I'm about an hour and a half from New York and an hour and a half from Philadelphia. So they always come to New York or
yeah,
Philadelphia. So
yeah,
I'm pretty lucky in that sense. That's the other advantage of the East
yeah,
Coast, I guess. There's
yeah.
enough big cities close enough that they're going to go to one of them.
Right. So I don't know if there's just this no-fly list on Northwest Territory or what, but they don't seem to come out here anymore.
Yeah,
What was funny, just as an aside, is a couple years ago, Patton Oswalt and uh, Emo Phillips, the comedians,
sure.
they they decided to do a tour where they're showing up in Montana and Idaho. Why? Because they had never performed in those states before. Now, I didn't go see him, but I just thought that was a funny idea. It's like we've
Absolutely.
been in all the other states except for these, so we're showing up there, So anyway, um,
Cross it off your list. Exactly.
yes.
Mhm.
So,
All right.
um, but if Mickey comes out again, I definitely want to see him. But it's like I always look at the itinerary, always get disappointed and go, okay, no turtles for me, no monkeys for me, no Beatles for me. Maybe the Rolling Stones. Oh, they've delayed the tour. Okay. You
Yeah.
know, I don't know. But
Nah. I guess trying to think of what the last thing I saw was. Boy, it's been a while. Stephen Page was wonderful, from the Bare Naked Ladies.
oh yeah.
Yeah, and he played with Dean Friedman opening, and Dean, of course, wrote introductions, so I got to see Dean again, and he remembered me, which is very nice.
Mhm.
Um, but Stephen Page was wonderful. I mean, if you're a Bare Naked Ladies fan, he's the reason you're a Bare Naked Ladies fan because they're
Okay.
not as good once he left, and his
Oh,
solo albums are what Bare Naked Ladies should be. So
oh.
anyone watching this, get Stephen Page's albums.
Stephen Page. Okay. Good to know. Yeah,
Hmm.
because I was wondering about that. I was looking into, yeah, I've been looking for different greatest hits compilations and stuff like that. And it's kind of interesting when you look at certain people's catalogs and suddenly, hit, 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 hit. Suddenly, no more hits. And it's like,
Yeah.
why? Oh, this person left or this happened or whatever, So, okay, there we go. Um, Mention before we go, because we've been talking for quite a while, and
Yes.
we can kind of wrap it up here. But I want to ask this before we go. You said there's other groups that you like. You mentioned XTC among others and everything like that. Just kind of curious, out of those groups, who have you seen over the years, and what did you think of them live?
Oh, well, here's the funny thing about XTC. I was living in Boston and I bought my XTC tickets and I was so excited to see them. And then 2 days before, they canceled the entire tour and they've never performed live since.
Oh,
Andy Partridge, the leader of XTC, basically had all kind of problems. He's like autistic and he wasn't taking his medicine and he said, I'm not
mm,
going to do this anymore. And I didn't get to see XTC.
oh,
Sparks is a band I've seen about 5 times. They're
mm,
one of my favorites, and they're not so huge that I get to see them in a theater as opposed to a huge gigantic thing. There were years when they were not doing well at all, and I got to see them in small things. And now they're doing better, so that's another one that I really enjoyed seeing.
mm.
I did see the Tubes a while ago,
Seen the
another
tubes a
West
lot.
Coast band. They were excellent, and I'm seeing these things that it's kind of fun to see them now because they're not as famous and I get to see them in a small place,
Mm, yeah, I
and,
like
and,
that
and,
too.
and enjoy it. Stephen Page was another one that was very good. And of course, I've seen Mickey many times.
Hmm.
And Crack the Sky is another band I really like that's very obscure, hardly anyone knows.
Mm,
I've seen them quite a few times. Dean Friedman, I've gone to see him. Recently, he did a concert at a really small little pub type place in New Jersey that's only like a half an hour from my house. And that's where I saw him again. And, I like those kind of intimate concerts that I can see these people like that. Uh, but there's so many bands I would love to see. Elvis Costello, I've been to quite a few of his
oh,
shows.
cool.
He's another one of my favorites of all times. Um, but David Byrne from Talking Heads, I did see him on a recent tour. This
Mm,
is the one we did where everyone, I don't know if you've seen them do this, the stage was absolutely empty. I had no idea what was going on.
yeah.
Every single member of the band had uh, wireless instruments.
Oh,
And instead of a drum kit, there was one person with a snare drum and one person with a bass drum. And so they had like five people playing drums for all the
hmm,
different parts of the drums. And the band would just go on and they'd move around all over the place because they weren't limited by the
okay.
stage. And it was
I
artistic.
think I saw part of that. They did a feature on Burn on Sunday morning one week. It might
Yeah,
be
because he later took the
YouTube and
show onto
yeah,
Broadway.
yeah,
And
yeah.
but we got to see him before he went on Broadway, which
Oh,
was
cool.
wonderful. And because I'm a big Talking Heads fan as well.
Yeah. Okay.
Boy, if you'd ask if I'm going to go downstairs and as soon as we get off, I'm going to go, oh, wait, I should have mentioned this person because I'm sure there are others like
Did you ever see
I
Talking
forgot that,
Heads?
oh, I should have mentioned I went to
Did you ever,
see, Joe Jackson. I did,
yeah.
um,
Did you ever
so
see Talking Heads or no?
I never saw Talking
Yeah,
Heads.
because I was saying they stopped touring pretty early for at least
No,
for me
I
and
saw the Ramones back when I was in college. They played our college gym on Halloween. It was the greatest concert ever. I was right against the stage for the Ramones, and
well,
everyone was in costume, and it was
uh,
like it was a great experience. But that was I was like 22 years old at the time, maybe
yeah, yeah.
21. So it was quite a while ago. They weren't, but to see the Ramones was really cool, obviously.
Mm. I guess what was the biggest concert you ever got into, even if you didn't like them or
Um, Crack the Sky came to play at our college, and I interviewed them for the college radio station, and I
oh,
was
it's
a big
pretty cool.
fan of them.
Yeah.
And then about 3 months later, they played at the Richmond Coliseum, which was a huge thing. They were opening for oh, what's the guy? Sally through the alley. What's the guy
Uh,
used to
oh,
sing and had all the girls in the background wearing the very
Robert Palmer?
Robert Palmer. They were
Okay,
opening
good.
for Robert Palmer. So I went to see that concert, and basically they invited me to be there, and I got to go backstage, and I actually got to jam with them. I picked up a guitar and we were jamming. I got to jam
Oh.
with Crack the Sky, which was really cool. And so I got to see them at this huge, gigantic place. Robert Palmer came on, and I left, and I went
Oh,
backstage and
you
talked
didn't
to
even
Crack the
watch.
Sky some more.
Was Palmer as big as he would get, or is he
Yeah,
still?
that was like he was at his peak at that point.
Okay, all right. Just
Um,
curious.
and we went to see in the big auditoriums. I remember seeing Yes years and
Oh,
years ago with Donovan opening for them. This is while I was still in college, and concerts were only like $35
oh
back in
yeah,
those days.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And Parliament Funkadelic.
Wow.
I don't remember much of that because of the strange smoke that was all over the place. It was I was getting high just by being there. But that was a fun concert. I think Heidi and I were pretty much the only white people in the audience, but it was still fun. You
Oh,
know, um,
cool.
those are the ones that I could see at the big, huge stadiums. But I've never gone to see. I'd love to go see. I would love to see Prince or Spielberg. Spielberg.
Yeah.
Springsteen.
Springsteen.
Um, there are ones I would love to see, but I just never was up. I just couldn't bring myself to pay $250 to see a
Right,
concert.
right. Yeah.
It doesn't seem
I'm
it
just
just was
happy that
too expensive.
I saw a lot of them back in the day, before the prices went way up,
Yeah.
So I mean, I saw Rolling Stones in '81. My mom bought the tickets,
Oh boy.
$15.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Yeah.
Jethro Tull, I remember seeing in one of
Uh,
those big
uh,
places too.
yeah.
Oh, Blondie and Devo. I
Oh,
got to be right in the front for that one. That
oh,
was
okay.
wonderful. And
Okay.
and Devo opened up and Blondie came out and we were in the front seat. And
Yeah.
when Devo came out, my entire band was there. I had a band when I was in college, and we
Yeah.
all got tickets to see them.
Yeah.
And they had these yellow costumes they wore, and they ripped them off, and underneath was something else, and they threw it in the audience, and we grabbed it. And we took it, and we took it and hung it on the wall where we practiced. I have no idea what happened to it, though.
Oh, okay. All right. For
Yeah.
years, I said that I saw Devo's last concert. It's no longer true, but they had agreed to perform on Earth Day, and I think it was Earth Day 1990.
Hmm.
And if that memory serves, and Peter, Paul, and Mary were singing, and it was raining. It was a rainy, drizzly April 1st, I think is the day Earth Day is, or something like that. But they sing or sang a cappella, so it's like they could be
Yeah.
out there in the rain singing Puff the Magic Dragon and blah blah blah. Anyway, so Devo comes out. And they're really concerned because the rain's coming down and all their stuff is electronic.
Yeah, of
And
course.
I think one of them played like one note on their bass, just like that, just to kind of test it or something like that. And then Mother's Vow and Gerald just kind of looked at each other and they go, and they left the
No,
stage.
no,
And
that's
then
too
they
bad.
didn't do another concert for almost 10 years after that. It
Mm.
wasn't because of that. It was just they were on the way out. It was
Oh
after they
yeah,
did a couple albums for Enigma Records. They were flopping. Nobody cared.
yeah,
And they just hung it up. And of course, they went on and did other things like Pee-wee's Big Adventure and all that other
right,
stuff.
right.
So, they were getting work, Rugrats and whatever. So it wasn't like they weren't working. They just weren't being Devo.
Yeah,
So anyway, so for
yeah.
years I said I saw their last concert and they played one note, but uh,
Oh
uh,
boy. No, I also remember seeing They Might Be Giants
oh
playing in
cool.
Boston. They did a
Never
free
saw them.
concert in
Oh,
Boston. That
hmm.
was fun. Kid Creole and the Coconuts is another
Oh,
one that
cool.
I'd love to go see. I saw them like four times. Um,
Never saw them. I'd like to.
oh,
Yeah.
they were fun. They're a fun
Hmm.
show. And at one point, I was right against the stage, mouthing the lyrics to all the words because I knew all the, and they were like looking at me like this guy knows everything. And one of the Coconuts during one of the songs handed me a cowbell so I could play along with them.
Yeah.
So I got to jam with Kid Creole and the Coconuts on a cowbell.
I, as far as participate, this just reminded me. Okay. There, I don't know if you're aware of this group. It's a big sensation on YouTube, and they actually did perform in Oregon. It's called Leonid and Company or Leonid and Friends. And
Nope.
what they specialize in is doing accurate recreations of early Chicago songs.
Oh wow.
So they'll do 25 or 6 to 4,
Hmm.
Make Me Smile, all that stuff. And they've also in more recent times incorporated Earth, Wind and Fire. So they'll do like Got to Get You in My Life
Hmm.
you know, uh and they were Russian and Ukrainian when the Ukrainian war started. The main singer who sounded just like Peter Cetera, he went and left to fight. So
No.
he's not there anymore, but he's still on YouTube if you seek him out. But they're incredible because they sound pitch perfect and everything, like
Hmm.
early Chicago. And they do Ides of March Vehicle and they do Blood,
Huh.
Sweat, and Tears because it's all that same kind of
Yeah,
brassy
yeah,
sounding
same kind
stuff.
of feel. Yeah.
Anyway, so I knew about this band and I showed my wife and we went and we got front row tickets, which I've never gotten for, and I guess everybody, they don't know quite who they are. So I'm in the front. At one point, the guy brings me on stage to sing one of the Chicago songs. I can't remember which one it was. I think it was Does Anybody Really Know What Time It Is, or something like one of
Yeah.
those early songs. And I just sang a couple verses and then they sent me back down. But there was all, so it's my
That's
big
kind of
claim to fame of being, kind of a quasi celebrity singer and a music.
excellent.
It was weird, because it was just random.
Yeah.
Yeah, he just said, "Come on up," and I said, "Me?" It's like, okay, you know,
No, I don't have anything like that that I can think of. I mean, I was in plenty of bands, obviously,
yeah,
but that's
yeah.
not the same thing. Um,
All
yeah.
right. Well,
Cool.
I
Anyway,
want to thank you, Michael, as always, for being special guest, great guest. We
um,
covered all the stuff that we typically do here on Fun Ideas Podcast. That's why it was actually turned out to be a good subject matter for the 300th episode. We didn't talk about
excellent.
300 too much, but Sparta. No, I don't know. Anyway,
Um, all right, yeah, thanks. And I appreciate you having me on. Anyone who's watching this, you can find me at michaelventrella.com. And that's where you can find out about my books and such. And join me on Facebook,
okay.
Instagram, and Blue Sky.
Okay. And did you want to plug anything more before we go? Just book-wise or anything like that?
Not really. I just, let people know that I do more than just write about Beatles and monkeys and stuff. I do have humorous fantasy novels if you're interested in that sort of thing. And I edit anthologies like that Beatles one I just showed you.
Okay.
Um, yeah, that's it.
Very good. And then just as a last minute plug again for the Monkees convention, it's Monkees 60. Michael and I will both be there at Charles Rosenay's Monkees 60 convention, September 5th through 7th. And that's all I can say about that. Please join us, even if you live in California and the West Coast. All right. It'll be worth your time. All
Absolutely.
right. And that wraps it up for another episode of Fun Ideas Podcast. And we will see you next time with episode 301.